reboot my machine and reconnect. But anyway, so the response seems to be fine now. Rishabh, could you please retype your question? There was something about LL1 grammar. Sorry, I missed the chat window. Okay, the question is, in LL1 grammar, when we had the first follow conflict in our grammar, we changed it to A deriving AAB, A deriving A or epsilon, to S deriving XB, X deriving YA, and Y deriving A or epsilon. But doesn't the conflict still remain as first of Y and follow of Y has A? So first of A, follow of A, first of Y and follow of Y, if they are the same terminals, that doesn't necessarily mean a conflict. So let me see. First of Y and follow of Y. Yeah, so what's happening here is that because first of Y is nullable, yeah, exactly. So first of Y is nullable, therefore first of Y and follow of Y need to be distinguishable. And therefore will it generate a conflict? Yeah, I think so. I think it will still generate a conflict. So in our slides we have said that this takes care of removing the conflict, is it? Yeah, so in general, when a non-terminal is nullable, at that time we can say that the first and follow should be disjoint. If that Y deriving epsilon would not have been there, then it is still okay to have first of Y as A and follow of Y as A. But yeah, if it is first and follow are the same or not same, but they have a common element, then we can say that it still has a conflict. Yeah, I am not able to recall this particular example, so can't say exactly what happens in that case. But in this example specifically, I can see that first and follow, they are not disjoint, completely disjoint, and therefore there will be a problem. Can't we have S deriving AX, X deriving AB or B? S deriving A followed by X, X deriving AB or B. Yeah, if I think this grammar is what Raghu has written is also deriving the same strings, and that doesn't seem to have the first follow conflict. Yeah, so probably the grammar that is shown by Rishabh, that is ambiguous. However, as far as the language is concerned, that is not ambiguous, and therefore we are able to come up with what Raghu has written. Any other concerns, questions? Okay, so we'll move ahead. Sorry about this delay. So we have looked at SDD for various expression evaluations as well as that functional style of array declaration, etc. And this particular SDD that I am showing is for the grammar where plus and star exist and star has a higher precedence over plus. Right? And the semantic rules corresponding to that are very simple, where you just have the synthetic attribute. So it is an S attributed SDD. The first rule, E prime deriving E prime dot val equal to E dot val. this rule, when you convert it into an SDT, you might have some sort of other implementation. For example, I might have a print statement there, or I might have some data structure implementation where I'm pushing it and so on. Right? This more on the implementation side of what happens at the abstract level in the SDT. So if I take out this and put it in the form of YARC-like syntax, then I see that there are these productions, and for each of them we have these evaluation orders, or not evaluation orders, but the actions associated with them. And if all those actions appear on the right hand side of these productions, that is only at the end, then this is called as a postfix SDT, as the name suggests. If all the actions appear on the left hand side of the production, then this is called as a prefix SDT, which is not very helpful for us because we in both LL as well as LR parsing, but it might be helpful in RL and RR parsing. So SDTs with all the actions to the right are called postfix SDTs. Only synthesized attributes are useful there because you don't need anything which is coming from the inherited part, right? So you are looking at the complete production as it is. So that means that all the non-terminals on the right hand side have already been derived from or reduced, and therefore you don't need to worry about any inherited part. If any inherited part is equal, that will come somewhere in between. So that means that for LR parsing, which can be so these postfix SDTs can be evaluated, can be implemented by executing actions along with the reductions, and the attribute values can be put onto the stack. So all the E.val, E1.val, T.val, etc. all of these can be pushed onto a stack nicely, and then we can talk about a viable handle at the top of the stack, and then perform different operations. Operations meaning that you take the viable handle and replace it with the left hand side non-terminal, etc. So all of this is possible, and I'm just going to show you how it is going to look like if you are using a stack. Right? So for example, if you are parsing a statement with the production A deriving X, Y, Z. Let's say that you have seen all of this X, Y, Z. So the derivation is A deriving X, Y, Z dot. That means you are at the stack top X, Y, Z, and then there is something below X which we are currently unaware of. From wherever A was derived, let's say something maybe BA was the production, then B's symbols might appear below X. So that X, Y, Z are the non-terminals, and let's say there are some attribute values, the synthesized attributes corresponding to those, right, which are also present. I'm just showing those for the sake of this, but those may not be present directly onto the stack. There might just be a pointer corresponding to X, Y, Z, and the synthesized attributes might be kept somewhere else. When we apply a particular rule corresponding to that, so remember that we were talking about E.val and T.val and so on. I'm now going to change it to what happens at the stack top. So current state of the stack top is shown here. And with respect to that, what we want to do is that we want to print, let's say, stack top, which is pointing at $-1, right? So that is E. Its value I want to print, and as soon as I print the value, I want to reduce the stack top, which means that I want to get rid of this $. Okay, so stack top was pointing to the $, now it is pointing to this particular value, because at that stage I might be taking some action and so on. Although that minus top is not very important, but its importance will become clear as we look at other productions, other actions corresponding to productions. For E1 plus T, stack top is at T, right? And then T plus and E1, these three terms need to be added together and then pushed back E onto the stack, right? So sorry, did I say this is not very important? Okay, so I should nullify that statement. So minus minus top is okay. So let me mention to you what's happening. So this stack of top minus 1 is referring to E. So that is getting printed, and then both these symbols need to be reduced to E prime. Okay. And therefore, I need to have the stack top corresponding to E prime specified there. So there are two minuses happening because of removal of E and dollar from the stack top, and then there is one plus happening because of pushing E prime onto the stack, and therefore I just push the stack back by one entity. And that is to say that E is whatever is at the stack top, that itself is referring to E prime. That will become clearer as we go along. So E1 plus T are three symbols, and what I am doing is that E1, which is top minus 2, plus stack top, which is T dot val, these are added together, and then that is pushed back to E, and that E is actually stack top minus 2, and therefore I am doing plus equal to here. And out of these three non-terminals, E1 plus and T, one of them is a terminal, but out of these three elements into the viable handle, I need to remove these three and replace those with the left hand side non-terminal. So I am going to do minus 3 plus 1, and therefore top becomes minus equal to 2. Right? Any questions on this part? Okay, so think about it as E1 plus T was there on the stack. So E1 plus T was here, and then I am replacing it with E, right? So that E is going to appear here, right, at the place of X, and therefore I can do stack top minus 2 equal to, that is E equal to E1 plus T. So that's what it is doing. E deriving T is just replacing whatever is there on the top of the stack with E, and that is just saying that whatever is on the top of the stack later, which is E, that equal to whatever is the currently the value on the stack, which is T, right? So we are not distinguishing across what element exists on it. So this is not a physical element which is present on it, right? Although I am showing it as X, Y, Z, it's not the physical element. It's just that whatever is the stack top, that is representing that element. And therefore this particular statement, and anyway it is not changing anything, and therefore this is grayed out. T1 star F is similar to E1 plus T, where I am saying that the next stack top, which is stack top minus 2, that is multiplied by, so whatever is the current stack top minus 2, which is T1 dot val, into stack top dot val, which is F dot val, and then top reduces by 3 and increases by 1, right? And similarly others, T arrow F. F deriving E is that again you have to remove 3 elements, so top minus equal to 2 is there. Stack top minus 2, which is going to be replacing opening parenthesis by F, that equal to stack top minus 1, which is E dot val, right? So that is what this is happening. Again, for digit you just need to replace the stack top, and that's not adding anything. So if there are any questions, please ask. Okay, this has a good, so now that I am able to show you that in case of postfix STDs, you can use the stack top directly because the viable handle appears at the top of the stack. We can now talk in terms of the offsets from the stack top rather than the XYZ symbols, right? And this is very similar to what happens in the context of $1, $2 in YAC, where we are talking about these different non-terminals on the right hand side of the arrow. Okay, so just to recap, Actions may be placed at any position within, okay, so within production, sorry, not recap. Within productions, definitely it means that the grammar is not S attributed grammar. It's probably going to use inherited attributes. So the actions can be placed anywhere, and these empty non-terminals are sometimes called as markers. But for our purpose in YAC, those are epsilon productions, right? So when you have a production X, then there is some action followed by Y, and then there is some action at the end. So this is performed in bottom-up parsing as soon as X appears on top of the parsing stack, right? And since we are talking about LR parsing, that means Y has not been yet reduced to. In case of top-down parsing, right, that is LL1 grammar, for example, just before expanding Y, if Y is a non-terminal, and if it is a terminal, then just before we check for Y in the input. Right? So that's in the top-down parsing. Yeah, so the postfix SDTs use only the S attributed definitions, and SDTs which implement the L attributed definitions might contain actions in between the productions. So, so if you have, so now I'm not talking about the postfix form of the SDT. I'm talking about the infix and postfix expressions. So can somebody tell me what will be the, so if you have a grammar, the expression grammar corresponding to expressions which is given in the infix form, right? So E plus T, E star T, etc. Can you convert it into the prefix form using your SDT? So if I have to print it in the infix form, what I would do is for E plus T, I'm just going to print E dot val, then I'm going to print plus, and then I'm going to print T dot val. Right. Actually, that will print it multiple times for multiple pluses, so I don't want to do that. Okay, so in the infix form, okay, think first in terms of infix form what you are going to do, and that will probably give you some idea as to when you should be printing it. So the digits need to be printed only once, and therefore it is best to print it for the last rule, which is F deriving digit. So at that time we can print the digit, but that plus and star, when you should be printing, that you can decide. So while printing plus and star, you should not be printing the E dot val and T dot val again, because that will be a repetition. And once you have that, then with whatever we have seen in terms of recursive formulation of prefix order and infix and postfix orders, you'll be able to just change it such that it prints prefix form rather than infix form. So any suggestions? Okay, so I'll show you that. So you could just have that print statement for plus and star just before deriving the grammar, right? And that will make sure that it prints it in the prefix form, because that digit is going to appear when you derive E1 and T1 and T and so on. So that is going to print the digit later, right? And if you would have printed it just after plus, or just before plus. That would print it in the infix form. If you put it at the end, then it prints it in the postfix form. Right, so that becomes as simple as that. Does anybody see any issues with this SDT? Brackets are not printed, but they are not necessary. Yeah, for prefix we and postfix we don't need the brackets. That is correct. Yeah, we don't need the parenthesis. That is correct. Because we said that in PDS that we said that there exists an evaluation order for prefix and postfix. So we don't need parenthesis. That is a big advantage of prefix and postfix. There is something more which is happening here. In print star even when we do not need it. Why is that? Yeah, so I am showing you the answer here, but see that star is going to be printed only when there is a star corresponding to it, right? So how are these actions treated by the parser? Yeah, we'll print star. Yeah, so it's not that when we don't need it, we'll still print it. We'll print it only when needed, right? And we'll print it only exactly once per star in the infix expression. So that is going to work perfectly. Yeah, so as I was showing, it has actually introduced shift reduce and reduce conflicts. Now that I have given you the answer, where does that appear? No, precedence consideration is taken care of by the grammar itself. So E1 plus T and T1 star F, those are appearing at different levels in the parse tree, and that is going to take care of the precedence in. So where is this shift reduce and reduce conflict occurring? E and T. Yeah, but I mean why? Okay, the question is, earlier was there when we did not have this action associated, was there a conflict? We need to perform an action E deriving T and T deriving T star F. That is okay for both T's. On the top of stack. Yeah, this Venkat, the statement doesn't look very precise. There is something more probably required, or maybe a little more clarification. So where is this shift reduce and reduce conflict coming into picture? Or let me put it this way. Let me ask first that does the original grammar without this action, does it contain shift reduce or reduce conflict? Printf statement is causing it? No. See, the action within the braces, that is unknown to the parser. Right? So whether there is a print statement there or something, is that marker derives epsilon. That is correct. Okay, so that seems to be on the right lines. So earlier we did not have any shift reduce or reduce conflicts. We have used this grammar earlier and it works perfectly fine with respect to bottom up parsing as well as LL parsing. as soon as we add these actions, what we are doing is adding an epsilon transition there, right? So according to the YARC, the way YARC treats these actions, this becomes an epsilon small non-terminal which derives to epsilon. This also derives to epsilon, and therefore the first of E and T turn out to be the same, and their follows are also turning out to be digits or parentheses, and therefore this causes the shift versus reduce conflict, right? So what's happening here is, so each marker is an empty non-terminal. Empty non-terminal meaning that non-terminal which derives epsilon, and therefore whether to reduce by any of these two rules, right? Whether to derive, for example, if this is let me call it x, this is y, then whether to reduce x or whether to reduce y, that is not clear with one look ahead, right? And on seeing a digit, I might as well shift, but that is also not clear because of this part. So whether to shift E deriving T, T deriving F, and F deriving digit, and therefore whether to shift, that is also unclear. Earlier there was only one possibility, just shift. Now suddenly those two reduces have happened, and therefore there is a shift reduce as well as reduce conflict. So such things you must have encountered in the assignment, where you add something in the production and suddenly it starts giving shift reduce or reduce conflict. And that's why I was saying that the epsilons are one of the important or one of the quite prominent causes of shift reduce and reduce conflicts. Right. So such an SDT will create problems for top-down and bottom-up parsing. So you will have to be careful. So there are other ways in which this can be done. For example, you might not want to print it right away, or you might want to change the grammar such that there is no shift reduce conflict according to this. Suddenly I am jumping to code generation, but that is something which is required as part of the SDT. So we are going to look at the IR generation as we go along. So just to motivate that, I am going to talk a little bit about code generation for a particular construct such as while. Sure. Yeah, sure. So Venkat is asking, can I explain this again? Let me go back. So what's happening is that first of this x, the non-terminal x which I have marked, and the first of y, both are epsilon, right? And therefore the follow of these are going to be used for the parsing stage, and the follow of these are going to be first of E1 and first of T1. First of E1 and first of T1 are opening parenthesis and digit. So when the opening parenthesis or digit comes, what is the action that should be taken by the parser, by a one look ahead parser? Earlier on opening parenthesis and digit, it used to just shift, right? Because that was the rule that was given. So E deriving T, and then T needs to derive F, F derives digit, so it will just shift. And then once it has shifted, then based on the next symbol, it will try to reduce. Right? So that was F deriving digit will happen after you have seen the digit. But when digit has not been consumed, at that time what should be done? That is the question. Earlier we used to only shift. Now because of this, there is E deriving X E1 plus T and T deriving Y T1 star F. And unfortunately X and Y are both epsilon. They are deriving to epsilon. There is also E deriving T which is not deriving to epsilon. Right? So the follow of this part, follow of X, follow of Y, and first of T, right? All of these contain opening parenthesis and digit in them, and since XY are nullable, therefore we have to look at the follow when to decide whether we need to shift or whether we want to apply some reduction. So therefore, based on this opening parenthesis and digit, which are the look aheads, I am not able to make a conclusion whether to derive to X or whether to derive epsilon to Y, right, without consuming that ID or opening parenthesis, or whether I should, I mean, epsilon is not there as part of the input. Epsilon is something which is there in the production, right? So I can take the next input symbol, which is opening parenthesis or digit, and just shift it so that I am trying to apply E deriving T as the next rule, right? And that will apply T deriving F, and that digit will get reduced to F, or I might get into opening parenthesis capital E closing parenthesis part. Right, so therefore there are two reduces which are possible because of this epsilon transition, which is X and Y, and then there is a shift possible because of E deriving. Right, so that is where the shift reduce conflict is coming into picture, as well as reduce reduce conflict. All right, so let's move ahead. Yeah, so we were talking about the code generation of while loop, and this is going to be an important part from the perspective that this is something which we are going to make use of in the IR generation as well as the final code generation. And this is how the compiler is going to work, right? When you look at a construct which is complicated enough, it divides it into different parts, makes use of the bottom-up parser, whatever you have computed for the inner block of the while, and then make use of it while generating the code and so on. So we'll see how that gets done. So the construct is going to be S, the statement derives while opening parenthesis, some condition, closing parenthesis, followed by statement. That statement is essentially the same statement because while can be nested and so on. But just for distinguishing, I am marking it as S1. So we assume that since this is bottom-up parsing, the code for S1 is available, which means that something has been done while deriving S1 and deriving from S1 or reducing to S1. And then similarly for the condition also something is available. We'll later evaluate these conditions when we actually generate the IR of the code. So if I have that, given this, I am going to generate a single code string. Code string meaning I am going to generate a string which consists of, in some sense, the intermediate representation of this code. Or we assume that this is almost like a final code corresponding to this particular construct, right? So it should require you certain attributes, and what all we are going to require. For example, there might be a jump or a go to required, right? That means that you will require some sort of label and so on. So can you tell me what all you might require for this? Line number of while, sure, that's a good guess. So the line number of while will probably act as a label, right? So that will help us in going to that particular line number. Alternatively, we could make use of a new label, whether it uses line number or not, but essentially we need a placeholder such that we can apply that jump. We need to store the start and label for possible continue break. Very good. So if there is a continue or a break statement, so continue is okay because that label is anyway going to be there because we have to go back to that while loop, the condition, evaluation of the condition. But as far as break is concerned, we need something like the next statement of S, right? We need the next statement of S, right? So that kind of gives you some sort of inherited attribute, because S dot next, if I use, that is going to be in the actions part on the right hand side, then that is going to give us an inherited attribute. Whereas C dot let's say label, which is going to be where C appears, right, for the evaluation, that is going to be probably a synthesized attribute. We are going to make use of both of them. Maybe we'll yeah, I should have probably completed today, but anyway, we lost some time. Statements can inherit from condition. Yes, statements can inherit from condition. That is correct, because we'll require the truth value of C. which means that you will require whether if C is true, then there is some branch taken. If C is false, then there is some other statement which gets executed. Essentially, it's a break. So I need that go to S dot next if it is false. If C is true, then I need to go to S1. Right. So these attributes are essentially the ones which we will require, which we will do in our next class. And then we'll move on to the intermediate representation. Any questions? Sorry, we lost some time due to my laptop's issue. Yeah, definitely this is not the way we should be reducing the pace of the class. Okay, so we'll meet at 2 o'clock on Moodle. I'll be available on Google Meet in case you have doubts. You can use the chat box for the doubt so that it becomes visible to everybody. Right, so the quiz is going to be from 2 to 3:30, but it is doable early on, and there will be some single choice answers, some multiple choice answers with single answer, and there will be multiple choice with multiple answers as the mock quiz must have told you. And there will be some numeric questions, right? So I think you will be able to do that in 1 hour. So any questions on today's class or the exam logistics? All right, see you then. All the best.